you all for coming back from the break for which we think will be a very lively panel. I know when we were preparing for the panel, we had a great conversation. So I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, but to my right is Phil, and then Kim, and then Mark at the end. So they can just say a brief introduction of who they are and their background, and then we'll get into our questions that I have. And then, of course, questions from the audience are always welcome and important as we have a great discussion.
My name is Phil Keb. I'm with Gencom. Gencom is a Miami-based company that invests in a broad range of hospitality assets, including an operating company, as well as several luxury hotels that are managed by the luxury brands.
And I'm Kim Dunbar. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for Pacific Hospitality Group, which is actually an Orange County-based company. And we own and operate 11 different assets. I have been career hospitality, and it chose me. I didn't choose it, but I think it's probably like many of us in the room. I'm just thrilled to be here. I know one of our earlier panelists said that, it's just so good to get back together and have this type of event, because the last 2 years have certainly seen significant changes in how we interact. And so I'm just thrilled to be given the chance to be up here and represent and just have the time together.
Hi, I'm Mark Heyman, CEO of Unifocus. We specialize in workforce management technologies. I think we're in 100 countries today with our various technologies, and we work everywhere from the luxury part. Fairmont's been a partner of ours for 16 years, all the way down to limited service, but obviously heavy focus on the luxury part. And how do you manage your workforce to get optimal results for your guests?
Well, again, thank you for agreeing to serve on this panel and for putting some time in before the panel so we could talk about these issues. And this is a perfect timing, I think, for our panel, because earlier this morning, obviously, we had a whole panel really on technology. And so I'd kind of like first question I have is, with all this technology entering in the industry, how does that change the type of people that we're hiring as we go out and look for talent? And I'm going to just turn it over to each of you and get your thoughts.
All right, I'll go first. I think one of the things that's occurred is that, good news and bad news about the hospitality industry is it employs a lot of people, but unfortunately, a lot of those jobs tend to be relatively low-skilled and entry-level jobs. And I think as technology becomes more and more a part of what we are doing in our business, there'll need to be an upgrade to the skill level, if you will, to be able to use and deal with the technology. I think it's a very, very easy transition because, how many of our employees today do not have a smartphone of some device? And, and most of the technology, and Mark can speak more to this than I can, most of the technology is no more complicated than the apps and the things that you use on your current iPhone.
Great. And I thought the two sessions earlier were a great segue into this, and the one about technology, seeing it from a different perspective. I don't think the technology changes the type of people we hire, but it changes how we interact and how we engage with our workforce. And, being able to empower them and just over the last 2 years to see the changes that we at Pacific Hospitality Group have made with technology. We're a scrappy company, so we don't have as many resources at our fingertips as others do, but we were forced into a position with the pandemic to employ technology, early on when temperature checks were, a telltale sign of COVID. We first started with the manual temperature check units, and so you can imagine trying to manage that across 12 different locations. And I think we were probably one of the first to employ the actual facial recognition temperature check units. And it actually not only made our team members feel more safe and comfortable, allowed us to understand if a team member possibly had COVID, but it also gave us a little bit of a competitive advantage with some of the groups that we were still entertaining. They were really impressed that we were focusing on the safety of the team members, as well as for their guests that were coming to enjoy the hotel. And secondly, it gave us an opportunity for us to really look at how we can engage with our workforce and help automate. And so we actually made the decision to institute a new human capital management system that not only allows us to respond to the crisis with talent, because it's not as plentiful as it was, so helping us automate, but it also allows us to engage with our team members from throughout the whole employment cycle, and that's been a huge win for us. Lastly, we are actually piloting technology at one of our hotels, a company called TipX, and we all talk about QR codes now and various apps that help support us in our business and our team members. But TipX is actually, although it's QR based, it's not an app, and it allows us to enter all of our hourly team members into this system. And as guests, we know that our preferences have changed. A lot of us aren't carrying cash, and it provides opportunities not only for our housekeepers, but all hourly team members, whether it's the front desk, whether it's valet, to be able to be recognized by our guests. And it's fantastic technology, so we're really excited that we're part of that piloting group. But those are just some examples of, how we're looking at it from the team member perspective. And I think the earlier session really did a great job on how they're looking at it from the guest and consumer perspective.
I think adding on to that, technology today actually can significantly expand the available workforce. In doing manual schedules, it's awfully difficult to figure out which person only wants to work 2 days a week, or which person's willing to work a couple of 10-hour days, et cetera. Or what segment of the market can you make adjustments to? With technology, all of that happens through artificial intelligence. It figures all that out. So the advantage of the technology is that you can dramatically increase the size or the access to your labor market. You can flex people far more effectively. We just introduced an app that enables employees to pick their own shifts, and we know the nature of the gig economy, and the employee today wants far more flexibility over when they work, when they can't work, those kind of issues. What we're seeing in the market is employees who work in Dallas may also want to work in Miami if they're there. There's applications in the market today that enable you to do that. So I think the whole movement away from manual scheduling, improved forecasting so you do a much better job understanding how much business you're actually going to service when your employees need to be available. And I think the big thing, one of the big things that technology does, it moves us away from the mindset of fixed shifts. No longer are we living in a world of a 7 to 3 shift, a 3 to 11 shift. The reality of the service industry is we can no longer be abide by what came out in manufacturing. We have some people that have to start at 6 in the morning. We have some people who need to start at 8 in the morning. And technology makes it very easy for managers to address all those issues and most critically meet the customer service demands of the guest.
So as the dean of a hospitality program that's educating future, industry professionals, what are the kinds of things that you're looking for when you're hiring employees that we should be sure we're teaching? So in other words, you do your typical interview when you're interviewing employees. Do they have to have a really understanding of how the technology works, or are the jobs still pretty much the same? They're just technologies enabling them? I'd be curious about your thoughts on that, especially Kim being operations. So
yeah, I think that the jobs are definitely the same, and the technology that's out there is not difficult to use. The earlier example, or in one of the sessions, the 78-year-old father is now using the QR code, and this is technology that is simple to use, and so I think that it doesn't, it doesn't require. We can all learn. It's a learned skill. And so I don't see that being a disadvantage. Yeah.
okay.
I don't think, if you look at the market today, 53, 54% or more of our labor force are millennials or Gen Z, which also means either now or within the next year, that same percentage will be within our management staff. They're already used to looking at it. Who doesn't know someone in their 20s or 30s when you meet them or talk to them? They don't have a cell phone glued to their hand, where they're not texting somebody. So I think that the simple reality is that it's easy to learn. I think the bigger issue really is, as an industry, are we living with old type of standards? We have a partner of ours, a large casino. We couldn't find housekeeping staff, so we broke up the task of housekeeping. So now we schedule people who, on checkouts, remove all the dirty linen, put the chemicals in the bathrooms, put clean linen on the bed, and now the housekeeper just makes up the room. So technology also enables us to rethink at times what we thought a task was, and potentially how we can break that down, and therefore use different skill levels within an organization to meet the overall goal of our bottom line and meeting the guest requirements. But I don't think the average individual we look to hire, either technologically or in our consulting group, has any issue very, very quickly picking up the technology and understanding, how's it going to be used.
Do you have a comment? So I want to follow up on that because I think that's interesting. Are other companies, you gave the example of the casino company, but are other companies beginning to take the job of hospitality and break it down into different increments so that different people can do different things using technology like you talked about in the housekeeping area? Are there other examples?
We've seen it in our market, not just breaking it down, but also from a cross-utilization standpoint. So we have some partners, for example, who have servers, and then because of the peaks and valleys, they don't have much to do between, let's say, 9:15 and 10 o'clock. We've actually been able to put them in the kitchen doing mise en place and prep. That reduces high-paid kitchen hours. We pay them at a different rate when they're doing it, but the ability to rethink tasks has been around for a while. The advantage to technology is once you have a forecast, you now have a built-in ability to segment where the work needs to be done, and then it can assign who's doing the work.
Mm-hmm. And do they find that the workers are happy to, instead of sitting around, happy to jump in and do something else?
I think from the feedback we have is that they're now involved in helping to prep for the food they're going to serve at lunch, for example, so they're far more engaged.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing some of that in any of your properties at all?
Well, I think that with COVID, it really forced the issue of us rethinking how we run our business. And I also think that it opened the door to, there were a lot of team members. I mean, we're no different than many of the companies where, we had to furlough, eventually lay off. But we had a significant number of team members that didn't want to stay home and collect the federal or the state subsidy, and they were willing to step in and learn other roles. And so I think it helped to accelerate that, and now it puts us in a position where your team members are more accustomed in the more technology that we're introducing. I think to your point, they see that advantage too. So I think that cross-utilization or cross-training has always been part of our DNA, but I really think that COVID really brought it out, as it did many things, and so I think that has been advantageous to us.
You brought up something, the whole issue of layoffs, mm-hmm. and obviously layoffs, furloughs, everybody furloughed everybody. And one of the things we talk a lot about is, employee loyalty, right? Obviously, we talk about guest loyalty, but then we also talk about employee loyalty. And the question that I really have is how are we going to restore employee loyalty, given that we sort of just let everybody go? And I know at UNLV, and other hospitality programs around the country, we've seen applications decline. Because parents are saying, well, don't go into the hospitality industry because they just lay everybody off when things go bad. And then we've had students who have left the hospitality industry to go work for Amazon and these other companies, and I think that's probably a trend you're all seeing. How do we restore this loyalty for employees when we didn't really show them loyalty?
Well, for those that were here yesterday morning when Chris Gabaldon kicked off the conference here, I mean, we could replay the first 12 or 14 minutes of his presentation yesterday on this specific topic. And Yesterday he talked about, we were in a crisis mode, sinking ship mode. We had some of our hotels that went from, generating, X dollars of revenue, on a given day, month, year, and to a screeching halt of zero. As many people in this room who operate and own hotels experience the same kind of thing. And with that became these incredible dislocations of employees and staff. And, a statistic I heard somebody here on the conference mention yesterday or today is, 20% of our, 20% of people who work in the hospitality industry have permanently left the industry. And so if for no other reason to replace that 20%, it's going to be a tremendous effort we have to undertake. I think specifically in the luxury side of the business, you go back and look at what I think made the Ritz-Carltons and the Four Seasons and the luxury brands very, very successful with service delivery, was creating a culture, a place for people to come to work, a place for people to belong. And whether it was the credo of Ritz-Carlton or the canon of Capella or the golden rule that the Four Seasons people used, and all the other luxury brands have similar things that they do. Everything from the selection process to the orientation to the daily lineups and all that stuff vaporized when all these employees got laid off. And in one of our hotels that I happen to frequent quite often, there was a new front desk employee there when I checked in 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it happens to be a Ritz-Carlton hotel. And I asked her, what are the 3 steps of service? And anybody that in this room that worked for Ritz-Carlton, you know the 3 steps of service because you worked there long enough to hear it, 50 times a day for every day you work there. And she didn't know what it was. And so I kind of queried about her recruitment process, her orientation, her onboarding process. And much like our industry did decades ago before the luxury people put in place these programs and this culture, is her employee orientation was a half day of sitting in a room like this, filling out insurance forms and understanding what the work schedule was and when those things happen. So I think as an industry, particularly the luxury sector, we have got to get incredibly rededicated to all of our employees of reinstilling the culture that these luxury hotel companies have done a great job of developing over decades. And we have to go back to these people having it's not a job, it's a place they belong to. They come for a purpose. And a big part of that is, there's been some conversations at the conferences about how do we attract people to our industry. We've never been the highest paying industry for people. And as a result of that, people oftentimes would take less income, but they did it because they were part of a bigger cause, they were part of a bigger purpose. And I think we've really got to get dedicated and get back, and people like us who are owners of luxury hotels, we need to stop beating up our operators for the margins and the additional cost and all that. We've got to put that money back in and invest that in our employees and our staffs. And anyway, enough on that topic, I think. But.
And I actually think that the answer to the question lies in how we didn't treat our team members during the pandemic. I work for a family-owned and still very active company, and it really spoke to the heart of who we are. It was so important for us to do everything we can to keep those team members on board. And yes, we did have to make some difficult decisions, but we continued health insurance for several months at no cost to the team members. When we had to make that decision in offboard, our CEO personally wrote a letter and had a video about how important those team members were to our organization. Those that were able to stay on in a furlough status, and we're talking about when we started the pandemic, we were at 1,850 team members, and we immediately had to lay off our part-timer, and that was about 450, but there was about 750 team members that weathered the storm with us. And some of the things we did, we work in hotels and we have all these supplies, and so for the first time in many people's lives, they're faced with financial distress. And so being able to come to the hotel and grab a bag that has pantry items, things that can help them live. We had little drive-through events like Easter where we gave our team members Easter baskets. These were team members that were on furlough, but we were still having communication with them. And, technology, actually, Zoom. Before that, we as a company did not use that. and we did not take advantage of the opportunities to bring our teams together. And, we also did not have team members work virtually for very long. It was probably for 2 months. But for the first time in our history, we were able to bring all of our hotels across the board together. Thank you to Zoom and the technology. So either you can love it and you can hate it. But we were able to establish, our first ever CEO all-company address, and it gave our CEO the opportunity to say, you are important to us. You make a difference. This is very difficult for all of us. And so, when the time comes to bring them back, sure, we've lost 25 to 30%, but those that have chosen to stay, it's because how we treated them during the pandemic that they made that choice. And so we're very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, I guess broadly, looking at the issue, and I think we all went through challenges, obviously significant ones during the COVID period. We had plenty of furloughs, et cetera. But I think we're really at an inflection point of changing the whole perspective of how we interact with our employees. I think historically, employees have been like a vendor, kind of a B2B relationship. I think we're at a point now where we need to look at the relationship as a B2C relationship. I think we need to do the same target marketing, same value proposition we do when we target our guests for the hotels, same way you have to do that for the employees. Because there are segments of the population, while in total I think we're at 4.2% unemployment, there are still segments of the population that are 5.5, 6.7, one or two is in the high sevens. I just think we need to rethink, and I think that all includes everything from more flexible shifting. I've always wondered why we don't give loyalty points to our employees. The technology makes it incredibly easy to do. I don't think anyone in this room who has a credit card doesn't get loyalty points, right? Well, we get loyalty points because we go to a hotel. I fly American Airlines because I have most of my points there, and I rarely fly United for a variety of different reasons. But I don't understand why, if we look at that as a means of creating loyalty in our guest, why shouldn't we be looking at that in the same way of creating loyalty with our team members? Beyond they can get a discount at a hotel room. And I think there are ways we need to rethink our entire relationship. And I think technology, depending how flexible we want to be, can support that whole movement.
And Phil, as an owner of hotels, how much do you really have a say in terms of the different companies that are managing your properties, where you can, help get them to come back to really building these cultures? And as an owner of a property, what advice would you give to others in this room who also own properties, who have, management companies manage their properties?
Well, we, like a lot of people, of the 9 or 10 luxury hotels we own, I think 7 of them will have record profitability in 2021. And, how did that happen? It was, we talked about the drive to, the fly. A lot of them are resorts, so it's the leisure market, the drive to, the fly to leisure market. And so we've seen profit margins explode because operating costs are down. And why are operating costs down? Because we can't hire employees. And so, if you don't hire someone, you don't pay them, and therefore you save money. And what's happened is the customer service scores have just been tanked. And the question you just asked as a result of that is, my colleagues who are in the asset management group with Gencom are meeting with the owners of our various hotels, whether it's Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, Rosewood, Auberge, moving into the 2022 budgeting period. The question is, okay, what are we doing about customer service scores? And we know that's going to come with more cost and more expense associated with it because of the staffing levels that we're going to have to do. In some instances, we have to pay more on an hourly basis or a salary for that. But we've got to do it, or otherwise the promise that we make to the customer, which is great service and a great experience in the hotels, is going to continue to suffer because of the fact hotels are understaffed.
Mm-hmm. Are you doing anything to Kim, to bring back, did you experience the same thing where you've got record profits because you don't have people? And what are you doing to kind of think about next year's budget in terms of bringing your service back to the levels it should be? Or do you not see any decrease?
Well, I think that, and this will probably get a little bit more into the next topic, is ensuring that the team members that you do have feel safe and protected. And there are some staggering statistics out there about how those in our industry are feeling overworked, are feeling tired. I mean, I'm sure all of us in the room have or still feel exhausted, and just don't feel like you can get your footing. And we of course, I'm not here to say that we have all the answers to the talent crisis, because we're in the same boat as everybody else. We've tried traditional approaches, sign-on bonuses. We've tried non-traditional, trying to get there with flex schedules. I think we have some work to do in that area. But we've also looked at our population and said we have this huge contingency of part-timers. And so one of the things that we looked at as an organization is, what can we do? And we're actually going to be offering health insurance to our part-time. And I know that not a lot of our competitors are doing that. That package looks a little bit different than our full-time. So those are some of those things that we can all do tangibly. But, to me, it really gets down to the wellness side. And, very fortunate to have our corporate director of wellness in the room. And it really, I went to her several weeks ago and I said, it's really concerning to me, because you look at, I think that there's a high level of depression across organizations, and depression used to be so significantly defined as extreme bouts of emptiness, or everything just seemed more extreme. And nowadays it's just about people not having that same energy, not having that passion in the things that they did. And it comes from, overnight our liberties were taken away from us, and many individuals became prisoners to their home. And so those things that you did socially, those outlets were no longer there for us. And so to me, as an organization, we can certainly come up with these tangible things to provide to team members, but if we can't get to the heart of how our team members are feeling and how this has impacted our team members mentally and financially, I don't think we're going to make the strides that we need to, and we're going to continue to have the issues. And so I think it goes really deep into truly understanding how that is impacting the organization. And a survey out there, 98% of CEOs said that they are going to focus on the wellness side of it for 2022. And earlier it talked about, you need money to invest in technology, but that return on investment has to be there. And so I think that it is incumbent upon us as leaders in the organization to really understand the whys behind and try to continue to find ways and programs that can help our team members continue to feel that protection and continue to feel that we care as an employer.
Yeah, I really agree with Kim on that. I think there's going to be many, many more chapters written on this as we learn more about what impact the whole COVID thing has had on our employees and our staff. And I think we're going to learn a lot more in the coming months and years as what the impact has been. And I think one thing going forward is as employers, we're going to need to be probably more flexible going forward than we have on things such as benefits. You point out about the shift work, Mark, and being able to use technology to help do scheduling in that regard to make sure hotels are staffed. But I think the workforce, the advantage is so many of us in this room have been productive and worked for the last 12 or 15 months with Zoom and other technologies and all that stuff. But to find people doing the audiovisual in the back of this room and who set all these tables up and will serve us food later today and check us out of the hotel, they can't Zoom to work. Mm-hmm. And they've struggled with some of these things that you referenced.
Yeah, I just yesterday faced with having a team member give their notice, going to a competitor. They're going to get a hybrid schedule. And, we honestly believe that, as an organization, our synergy comes from our togetherness, our people togetherness. And, we also know in our corporate office that we are there to support our hotels. And yes, there are some positions in the hotel that you can work remote, primarily sales revenue management, but as a whole you can't. And so our philosophy is we want to be there and walk the talk with them. But the reality is, I hate to know that I'm losing team members because somebody's willing to offer that flex schedule. And I think it's important for, as the head of human resources, to continuously be sensitive to this and try to push that message forward, because we're being forced to rethink it. I believe there is a lot of fantastic things that have come out of COVID. From a guest-facing side, I have always loved outdoor dining, never thought there was enough of it, and now it's everywhere. And we took advantage at some of our hotels to expand that, and it's now become part of who we are. And so I think that, there is a lot of good, but there's a lot of learning that still needs to come from it. And these are the types of things that we have to continuously stretch our muscles and think outside the box, whereas before we didn't have to worry about it. And so I think flexibility and again the wellness piece are the two big hot ones for going into 2022.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we have to do a better job with the staff, letting them know when they're winning and when they're accomplishing things. I think it's great because we grew up where I sure did in the management of walking around. The reality is, though, that our managers maybe don't give enough feedback, right? So there's not a meeting we have in our organization. First thing we open every meeting with is all of our wows. What's happened since our last meeting that went well? There are technologies, I'm not trying to push our own, but we're introducing gamification in January, right? Where employees and managers can earn badges based on success, and then they get celebrated for those successes. And I think you create loyalty when you have success going on and there's peer-to-peer feedback. And I think to Kim's point, it creates a stronger sense of family within the organization. And I think there's a lot of things that technology can do if we're prepared, excuse me, as Phil said, to really rethink the model and to understand. And while I think we can spend time, and we will, about what happened during COVID, I think the reality is we have to find a way to attract, to some degree, a new workforce into our business. And we have to therefore live in their world. The Gen Z, the millennial, they game all the time, right? They see things that pop up. I use an iFit, and it shows me every hour how many steps I'm short of reaching my goal, right? But we live in this environment, and if we're going to create loyalty and get more people engaged in our business, we have to fit into their model. And I think historically, we've asked them to fit into our model. Yeah. And I think technology can help us significantly because of its tracking capabilities, measurement capabilities, to drive higher levels of winning and therefore identifying winning.
I'm curious about that, the technology you mentioned about having loyalty points for employees. What are the kinds of things you're doing? And I know you don't want to talk about your company, but what are the things that because it's an intriguing idea, can you give some specific examples of what you might do, a firm might do to create a loyalty program for their employees to get them to want to stay and retain?
Just start with time and attendance. Most systems, we measure how many times an employee is absent. Let's measure how many times an employee shows up. Let's focus on the positive side. And we used to do it. We built a technology. I used to call it playing golf. You wanted to get your lowest score, right? Well, it's not. Let's move everyone to getting their highest score. Every time they show up for work, every time they meet a shift, right? Number of days they've worked in a row where they haven't been absent. We all have accident programs, or we've had them for years. We can do all that, and technology makes it unbelievably easy. Now, all of a sudden, I've got an employee with 5,000 points, 6,000 points. Maybe they're not going to go to that neighbor next door because they don't want to give up all the points, because they know if they get another 1,000 points, they got a booklet and they can go get something that maybe they couldn't afford themselves. I was kidding around with someone last night in my age bracket, and a few of you may be in that. We were talking about S&H green stamps. Yeah. Most of us know that Radisson Hotels was started with gold bond stamps, right? Well, that was the simple motivation. This friend was telling me that his mother would take him, he could never figure out this dingy store, and they'd buy stuff, and yet, but why? Because they gave up S&H green stamps. So they went and bought. And I just think there are more things we can do, whether it's attendance, we do it on our management side, on using technology properly, you know, in a scorecard, we let them earn badges, we can generate points. And it's really the same technology. We accrue time off based on hours worked. Well, we're just changing our equations. But I do think that we have to step back and really rethink how do we move forward, because part of, I think, the reality is we accepted 100% turnover in industry for as long as I've been ever in the industry. And now, because of COVID, we've said we can no longer afford it. The reality is we couldn't afford it 10 years ago, but we knew we could get whatever labor we needed, and now we can't. So now we have to rethink our whole relationship in the market.
Do you see owners as an owner, you know, the companies that really just own the assets, do you see them buying into this if it's going to lower their margins at all? What do you, how should we, as if I'm a hotel operator, how should I tell my owner, hey, this is the right thing?
You know, I do because it works. I mean, you talk about turnover, and a long time ago I worked at Ritz-Carlton, and at that time, corporate-wide, the turnover was less than 23%.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And you were the market leader.
I can't do the math. You can do the math very quickly on 23% turnover versus a 75% turnover, what that cost you annually in hiring costs, training cost, and all those things. So, yeah, and quite honestly, particularly in the luxury sector, I mean, you know, these hotels are continuing to get hammered by lower and lower customer satisfaction scores because we don't have the staff or don't have the right staff that's delivering the service experience to the customer. At the end of the day, that's how we make these things profitable, is high average rates, high cost for food and beverage, but people will pay for that because they have an extraordinary experience. If they don't have an extraordinary experience, they're going to stop paying for it at some point in time. And then that, from an owner's perspective, that becomes an untenable position to be in.
One of the questions that I want to ask is, because we've been talking a lot about technology here, you know, from the guest side and using technology because we do have less employees working. The question I'm curious about, and I'm sure most of everybody in the room is, hopefully, since we're asking the question, is how do we make sure that we're using technology, but we're not losing what it means to be hospitable and hospitality? You know, from and I know you want to reduce the pain points, but how do we make sure that we're not just making it so we're reducing all aspects of hospitality?
I think it depends on which technology you're using. If you go into a restaurant and you sit down and you order off a kiosk, you know, and someone just delivers your food and then comes to the table and says, who had the hamburger, who had the whatever, well, you've probably lost some of the hospitality. So while a lot of people, you know, if you go to Denver Airport or whatever, you can order off kiosk, but I don't really think Schlotsky's cares too much about the hospitality experience, you know, in getting you a sandwich. So the question becomes, how do you balance out? There's no reason why, if you've scheduled people properly and trained them well, you should lose any part of hospitality. The part, actually, I would argue, you lose hospitality is when you're either overtaxing your employees, right, and they don't have the time to deliver the service, or conversely, when your hours are misallocated and people are standing around not being productive or adding value, you lose it there also. And then the last part, on the technology side, a little bit different, is I think we have to do a better job with our managers and how they train. I had breakfast at another hotel, name not to be mentioned, and we had a trainee working with us for breakfast, and I thought it was terrible the way the person was trained. Just the number of extra steps that person had to take. Didn't take stuff off the table, you know, whatever you want to call it. So I think the other part is, if you use training and you have certification programs in place, and the employee feels more comfortable about what they're doing, then hospitality will also increase.
You know, I had one of my most fantastic experiences was about 5 months ago, having gone to a ball game in San Francisco and went to one of the local brew pubs that I had been there before, and it was the traditional service before where, you know, you have a server, but you also have a runner, you also have a busser. Well, we don't have that luxury any longer of having that kind of staff available. They moved to the QR code and, you know, didn't lose a step in hospitality because that person, that server, was the only person I saw throughout the experience. She came over and greeted us, made us feel very at home, but everything was automated from, you know, your order to even paying for it. And to me, it created a more fluid experience and a personable experience because that same individual wasn't, you know, sure, they weren't touching the table as many times as they used to, but I believe that all of our preferences, most consumers' preferences have changed, and there is more tolerance for that. So you walk away from that, and in the pre-COVID days, it was you were accustomed to 3 individuals servicing your table. So, you know, not only are you using technology, but you're also being able to combat the lack of talent out there. And then those that you do have, that's what you have to focus on, is making sure that they do have the service training and they do have that passion for hospitality, because then you won't skip a beat and you won't lose that hospitable piece to it.
Okay. Well, we're kind of running at a time, and I want to spend a couple of minutes just to see if there's any questions from the audience. But the things that I've learned from this great panel, in terms of, because the title was, you know, overcoming the talent crisis, and the things I heard were, one, about basically, you know, using technology to help change the scheduling, to make it easy for people to choose their best 4 hours of the day, as Starbucks, you know, is doing. You know, breaking the jobs apart so different. We use the technology to schedule things in a better way. And the example was looking at the rooms. We talked about the gamification of rewarding people for great behavior. We talked about the importance of the culture being critical with the training and not just kind of doing a half an hour or a half a day in a room, but really teaching the whole value coming from leadership. We talked about not a job, but kind of a career with a future. We talked also about upscaling, so that the people who are working with us, we're giving them more benefits so they're learning more, and doing cross-utilization so they feel more valued. Is that a good summary of what we kind of covered? Anything I missed?
So. Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
We can hear you.
I think if you maybe, because then people in the back can hear you.
Hello again, everyone. So first, I just want to give a little bit of background about myself because I think it's pertinent to my question. I'm 23 years old. I just graduated from Michigan State University with a hospitality degree. Sorry, Dean Schumacher, in May. And
not everybody can get into UNLV.
I do have siblings who go to UNLV, though. I guess they're better than me. So upon graduation, I was rejected from countless hospitality jobs because these days it seems like entry-level positions are requiring 2 to 3 years of experience or more, which to me kind of contradicts the idea of an entry-level position. And myself and my peers just spent 16 years in school, studying and educating ourselves, with 4 of those years dedicated to hospitality specifically, to enter the workforce in a good position only to be rejected because of a lack of experience, even having completed internships every summer. So even for people who didn't graduate with a hospitality degree or even didn't graduate college, I know that they're willing to work and learn and grow, but aren't given the opportunity because no one is willing to take a chance on employees who don't have experience in the field or the position already. So in my personal opinion, I think this is a huge hiring barrier, and I know that many of my peers would agree. So is that something that you believe Hospitality Human Resources is willing to address to try to overcome this talent crisis? Thank you.
You want to take this one, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I am sorry that you have that experience. To me, there is, for us, the most successful individuals are going to be the ones that have the passion for the industry. And I have always felt that hospitality is an industry that will open itself to individuals with or without experience. And so I don't feel that we can be selective in that way. And it's, for us, the ability to bring somebody in and be able to have them, I think we talked about this as we were, preparing, is, making it a career and giving them that opportunity. And I know for us, our decision to implement a human capital management system allows us the ability to, when we are a scrappy and less resource company, to be able to create career tracks through a learning and development system, where up to this point, our corporate director of learning and development has done all of this manually herself. And we recognize the importance of, for the generations of today, if they're not learning from it and they're not loving it, they're going to be leaving it. And so we feel that we're advantaged by being able to establish these career tracks so that individuals, maybe without the experience, say, hey, I'm a guest service associate. What can I do to become a front office supervisor? And we help set them up for success. And so I think it's very important. And it saddens me that individuals would be turned away because of a lack of experience. If you have the passion, you can do it.
Yeah, I know we're about out of time here. First of all, I'm shocked of the situation you're in. The other thing is I have a pet peeve where I am in this industry, and a lot of people in this room all challenge the same thing. We have an obligation to help young people get into this industry and be a part of it. I'm happy to help you afterwards. And I was in we own a couple properties in Bermuda. I was in a session there recently about this. How do we get Bermudians in the industry and everything? And you know this better than I do. I mean, with the exception of pastry chefs, refrigeration mechanics, and people in accounting, this industry basically should be hiring people for attitude and not their specific skill set. I mean, your training department could teach me how to be a banquet waiter.
I don't know.
And I have zero, but maybe not, Mark. But anyway, so, but my point is, as an industry, 2-3 year, yeah, right. Pastry chef, working in the kitchen, I get all that stuff. But bellman, doorman, sales, I think hiring attitude is much more important than hiring skill set.
Yeah. Just time for a couple more questions, because I know we have.
I'll just, it's something that's a little bit in the line of what Lauren asked, which is how does it come into play that we're hiring? And I'm a hospitality veteran. I've been in the hospitality business since the 1980s. And so how does that, we're talking a lot about technology, and when now the gatekeeper are these hiring platforms that really just kind of select potential employees based on an algorithm. And people, so I have this personal experience. I'm actually related to Lauren, so I'm her aunt. And so I had this experience where she's just automatically getting rejected by these platforms. And I basically said, there's just something wrong here because, she really wants to be in the hospitality business. She's got these great internships. So how do employers with this talent crisis continue to use these platforms that really are not matching the right people? Could that be an issue? That is what is happening here.
I mean, we use a talent platform in our different positions, but we tailor the platform to what we're looking for. If you're talking about just having a blanket industry-wide platform, it's almost like the stock market, trading shares, because computers say to trade shares. So I think part of it's a matter of it's the responsibility of the organization to determine how they want to use that platform. There are other tests that organizations use. We use some of them not to reject or accept, but just to understand strengths and weaknesses of what a training process needs to happen to make the person successful. But my fundamental is, whoever's using the platforms has the ability to tailor the platform to what they're looking for. And if in the platform it says, if you don't have 3 years experience, we're automatically rejecting you, well, that's the organizational issue. It's not the tech issue.
I'm in the tech space,
Mhm.
I understand that. I was talking more about exactly
Yeah.
what organizations are really uploading into these platforms.
Sure.
Requirements, and could that potentially be affecting
No.
the fact that this tiling process is as big as it is?
Yep.
And that's a good discussion to continue during lunch. Just because we have our next, the chairman of Carnival Cruise is I think on the line waiting for our conversation. So I want to thank the panel.
Thank you.
I want to thank the audience. Hopefully it was a good conversation for you all.
Thanks.